Good evening. We welcome you to the Town of Concord's DEI Commission Community Coffee and Conversation with candidates dedicated to deepening our shared commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today's gathering is not just about dialogue, it is about action, collaboration, and strengthening the fabric of our community as part of our We Are Concord initiative, which is a special opportunity to celebrate Concord in all of its uniqueness together. My name is Rose Felix Kratzley, and I'm honored to stand before you as someone who represents 3 generations here in Concord, with my family who live, work, and learn in Concord. Like many immigrant families, my parents left their homeland of India, traveling first to Ethiopia and then to the United States, in pursuit of a brighter future for their children. They worked tirelessly to instill in us a deep connection to our heritage and values, faith, family, perseverance, hard work, love, and a commitment to a beloved community. These are the same values that bring us together to celebrate and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community, striving to pass these values down to our children and to future generations. In the past year, we've had significant milestones in fostering an inclusive and celebratory community, with hosting Concord's Pride Day, Juneteenth, India Day, a townwide Diwali celebration, all powerful moments of cultural exchange that allowed us to share traditions, honor histories, and build bridges of cultural understanding. These events have been an invitation to all, fostering a sense of belonging and deepening our collective appreciation for the rich diversity that makes Concord home. The We Are Concord initiative builds on this momentum. It is a special invitation to collaborate, celebrate, and uplift the diverse cultures, families, organizations, and institutions to make Concord unique. As the DEI Commission, our focus has been on advancing well-being, equity, and access. Having worked with communities from many, many backgrounds, I've witnessed firsthand the transformative power of inclusive, civic, educational, and cultural spaces. And I'm proud to be part of a collective efforts here in Concord to make it a more welcoming place. This work is most fruitful when done with trusted partners. Here in Concord, we are so fortunate to have incredible partners across our town, from community organizations and schools to local government and public institutions, all working together to ensure a more welcoming and equitable Concord. We wish to extend our gratitude to town leadership and staff, the Concord Library, the Concord Police Department, especially Lieutenant Tim Landers, Detective Sergeant Harrington, Officer Sam Simpson, our patrol officers, and our newest furry addition to the town of Concord, our town comfort dog, Thor, who is here. Thanks for always partnering with us for all of our coffees, and also bringing the coffee and ensure that we're staying hydrated through these opportunities to gather in community. So thank you. The League of Women Voters, CORE, Communities Organizing Against Racism, the Human Rights Council, and thank you to our media partners, Minuteman Media and the Concord Bridge, and so many more. Your dedication and partnership continue to shape our town into a place where we all can feel safe, seen, heard, and valued. So as we look ahead, we have so much to celebrate and look forward together. We invite you all to join us to several upcoming events in our community, including Concord's first townwide Holy Celebration on April 5th, which will be held from 1 to 3 p.m. at Emerson Field. It's a beautiful festival of colors, joy, and renewal. The next is Concord's 250th Multicultural Showcase, which will be held on April 19th at 6 p.m. at 51 Walden. It's a landmark event in uniting a coalition of community organizations to celebrate the richness of Concord's cultural diversity, as well as Pride Day, Juneteenth, India Day, townwide Diwali celebrations, and so much more. Each offering a meaningful opportunity to honor heritage, amplify voices, and create spaces of joy and belonging. As we prepare for Concord's 250th, this is a pivotal moment to honor our history while actively shaping a future that is more inclusive, just, and representative of all who call Concord home. In alignment with the DEI's Commission's charge To foster cooperation, understanding, and dialogue, we root our work in the values of collaboration, building bridges across differences to ensure that our collective efforts lead to meaningful and lasting change. Communication, engaging in open, honest, and compassionate dialogue to deepen understanding and trust. Care, centering people in our work, recognizing that equity and justice require both structural change and collective action. By embracing these values, we affirm that we are better together, stronger when we uplift one another, listen with intention, and take action rooted in empathy, justice, and shared responsibility. So with that in heart and mind, I'm honored to introduce our moderator for this evening, Grant Hightower. As the Assistant Head of School for Student Life at Concord Academy, Grant has dedicated himself to creating inclusive and affirming spaces for students, educators, and community members alike. His presence, leadership, and expertise in DEI advocacy make him a wonderful guide for tonight's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Grant Hightower.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Concord, good evening. How y'all doing? All right. So I'm happy to be the guest moderator for this evening. The way that tonight will work is that we will have a series of questions for all candidates to speak to generally. We are going to give each candidate 3 minutes, roughly. They can use as much time or as little time as they need during that allotment of time to speak to the different questions that are asked. The way that we will start this evening is we will have the select board side go first, and we'll move our way down through the school committee. And so with that at hand, candidates, do you have any questions or concerns about the format or the nature of what we're going to be doing tonight? All right. So with that squared away, we will begin. Our first question. Citing President Dwight D. Eisenhower's words, "A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both." Can you please speak to the reality that as a candidate for public office in Concord, how do you see your role in upholding and strengthening the core values that define the community? How will you ensure that policies and decisions reflect the principles that serve the entire town? What steps will you take to build a culture of civic engagement, responsibility, and shared purpose that brings all residents, regardless of personal background or access, into the work of shaping Concord's future? So we'll start over with Paul. Feel free to ask for, a reminder.
Hello. Can you hear me? Thanks. First, welcome everybody. I saw the comfort dog back there. I think I could have used a comfort dog at several of these other forums, and maybe tonight. Thank you, Grant. On your question, I think there are a few key roles for the select board. One is just setting the tone. The select board has to just set a tone for the values of the community, for diversity, for inclusion, and not only to set the tone, but to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think the select board needs to make sure that people of all across our spectrum are included, that they are part of our civic engagement, that they are part of committees, that they have a say. I am very big into communication. I've talked about that before. I've spent a lot of my professional life in communicating very complex issues and things to people. Communication is two ways. And I'm a big advocate of a lot of public comment, open comments at meetings, beginning of meetings, end of meetings, and in between. So I think getting people involved, urging people to be involved in specific issues and in general issues, getting people's opinions, and soliciting those opinions. Sometimes there may not be any hands raised in a room, and I would solicit opinions. So I think getting people to voice their opinions, getting people included in civic engagement, getting people to sign up for committees, working with the DEI Commission, have the DEI Commission work with other committees. That cross-fertilization of commissions and committees in this town is very powerful. Working across the select board, line of authority and the school committee line of authority on all these issues is really important. So I mean, there are lots of ways to kind of tackle this issue. And, but I think communication and inclusion and listening to people, I'm a big listener of people, are really all important. So there are a lot of elements in
Thank you,
this
Paul.
solution, if it is a solution.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So good question. Yeah. So let me start by saying that I grew up in Lincoln, which is, I'm going to say, not very diverse. But this is to bring it back to you. I came to Concord to go to Concord Academy.
Fair enough. Welcome. All right now.
Yeah, right?
Good choice.
Just, no, but it's an interesting point because at Concord Academy, as you know, I met a lot of people, different gender expressions, different sexuality, all different backgrounds, and I walked around Concord with them, and I had some friends that had a real hard time. And I saw it, and there's only so much I can do, but I've come back to Concord now as a business owner. I have right now about 50 employees, very diverse. Again, same thing, all kinds of, from all different walks of life, different parts of the world, different gender expressions, different sexualities. What we do, and it's going to be hard to say what comes up before the select board, what issues come up, but what's really important is that we bring our values to whatever issues do come up. And what I try to do every day is create a safe space for everyone, listen to everyone, and just people know that if they have an issue, they can come and talk to me, and I will defend their right to be who they are. And I think I've mentioned this before. I still have seen it. I saw it when I was in high school, and I've seen it as a business owner. There are people that I've had to ask leave my business because that's how they were not treating people, my staff, with respect. So I don't know specific issues today, but I know that in light of what's happening in the world, which is so depressing and upsetting, this is going to be tough for us to maintain our values. So whatever issue comes before us, I agree, listening, engaging, and just creating safe spaces for people.
Thank you.
Hi. The DEI Commission was set up in 2021 by the Select Board before I was on the Select Board. And at the time, I was skeptical because I thought setting up a commission was a way to kind of put this problem in a corner or delegate it to a bunch of people and they were going to solve it for us and we didn't have to think about it ourselves or examine ourselves. So I was skeptical about whether this was a good idea, but I trusted that the Select Board had thought about it and talked about it, and they set up the commission, and I've watched what they're doing. And they're doing some really good work as far as celebrations, welcoming people, having events that make people feel safe and welcome. As a Select Board member, I think one of the things we can do is make sure that the work of the DEI Commission gets integrated more into the other committees that we have in town, things like the housing groups. What can the housing groups do as far as advancing DEI principles? What can the Transportation Committee do as far as advancing? What can the Committee on Disabilities do? So what can other committees in town do so that, again, the work of DEI isn't isolated in a commission that does wonderful events, has wonderful proclamations, but is part of our everyday governance?
Thank you.
So I think like a lot of issues, there's no silver bullet for any of these things. You know, everything that Paul, Elizabeth, and Mary just said make a lot of sense to me, and I would say yes, absolutely ditto, let's go with it. I think that Paul said the Select Board can, above all, set the tone. I think that is a very important thing. And to me, that means in everything we do, we think of the entire community, right? Sort of doesn't make sense to think about just pieces of our community when we make policy or set or rules or decisions and fund projects and spend money, et cetera. So it should be thinking about the whole community. So for example, a number of us, I think all the candidates have been to the Coalition on Aging. Some of us went to Newbury Court. We're going to go to hear from the Concord Housing Authority tomorrow. I talked to a woman on the way in here about it, and she said, we need to be heard too. Some of our issues need to be heard. So that's not easy to do, right? But we need to reach out and make sure those folks are included And so to that point, I think expanding the scope of the DEI commission to make sure it actually reaches out to folks of different, say, physical abilities, folks of different ages, et cetera, that's included in the umbrella. But again, I don't think there's any one answer to this. It's just every day thinking about the entire community. And, you know, as a business guy, there was always this thing, you know, about the real leader goes and walks the manufacturing floor, right? You don't just sit in your office all day. You go and walk the floor and talk to folks about what's going on. Why is this happening or this not happening? Why do we have quality issues? I think a leader, and I think that kind of leadership can apply to the select board as well. We need to just get out there and talk to folks at Newbury Court and CHA and everywhere else to figure out how to bring them into the community.
Thank you so much. So transition into the school committee, just a reminder, refresher. As a candidate for public office in Concord, how do you see your role in upholding and strengthening the core values that define this community? How will you ensure that policies and decisions reflect the principles that serve the entire town and school population? What steps will you take to build a culture of civic engagement, responsibility, and shared purpose that brings all residents, regardless of personal background or access, into the work of shaping Concord's young future? Alexa, we'll start with you.
Is this on?
It
Usually
is,
people
yeah.
can hear me. I'm Alexa Anderson, running for school committee. I'm not known for brevity, and you don't have a time limit, so if
No,
someone
we
needs
got
to
3
wrap
minutes, 3
me
minutes
up.
per person, I got you. I'll let you know when
Please
we're
wrap
at
me
a
up.
minute, yeah.
So there are really 2 ways that the school committee can foster and demonstrate our commitment to DEIB. That is first through our policy making. We examine all of our policies through that lens, even when they don't seem to be particularly relevant to DEIB. But I'll talk about a couple of policies that we've examined recently and why. So about 2-3 years ago, we had a regional group. Some people were in fact from Concord, but they were a broader group than just Concordians that were coming to our school committee and making public comment about what they perceived to be inappropriate texts available in our libraries. They were all very narrowly focused, and they were upset about any text that sort of referenced gay romance or gay relationships. Anything from like texts we read in elementary school that just talk about a youngster's questioning of their sexuality and sort of coming into their own, you know, all the way up through more mature texts that we have in our high schools. So immediately, what we did was go to our policies and ensure that because so many books were getting banned and removed by school boards throughout the country, you know, we had to make sure that we could shore up our policies to protect our librarians, protect our staff from the text that, you know, from the text that we were teaching and the texts that were available to our students to check out and read privately on their own. So we can have great abilities to demonstrate our values through our policy work. We also are the 4th district in the state of Massachusetts to have MECO representation at the school committee level. That was another way that we heard the community of Concord and Boston saying, you know, this is something that we think could be important, and we reacted immediately. And we had a policy drafted within 2 months. I think that's a testament to showing where we all put our money where our mouth is.
25 seconds.
I'll wrap it up. And then the second way in which we really do demonstrate our commitment to DEI is through our financial commitments. I always talk about how if you are so bored as to look through our line item budget, which is pages and pages and pages, you'll see what emerges is really a value statement. We are investing in our METCO program. What time? Yeah. Oh, come on. Okay. You know, so I think you can see that there as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michael?
Is this working? Okay.
Doesn't seem like it, right?
So I understand your question as being one of looking at what we do with our principles to direct and secure our privileges. So I think our ideals, Concord's ideals of being an egalitarian community, freedom-loving, forward-thinking, those would direct the principles we frame and secure the privileges for all. So how would I do that as a part of the school committee? I would look beyond policy and budget, because our principles are going to guide what our policy and budget are going to be. How would that play out in our schools? We want to make certain that we develop an educational system that speaks to, in all levels, speaks to all of our students, that approaches our students not where we want them to be, but where they are, takes them, gives them the support they need to achieve, the challenge that they need to excel, and makes certain that that happens across the spectrum. Now, you can set that up with policy, you can secure that with budget, but you benchmark to make certain that if these are the goals that I want to reach, that with this policy, that am I reaching that goal? And if I'm not, let's tweak that to make certain by reiteration and reiteration and reiteration that we get to the goal that we want. An equal education, equal support for all, because our responsibility at the end of the day is to make certain that the end, when our children are graduating from school, that they are citizens that can step into a multicultural world proudly, comfortably, excel, achieve and excel. So their budget, policy are all things that are tools we can use, but they're directed by our principles. If we stick true to our principles, and I work with my colleagues, be it Sandeep or Alexa and the other colleagues on this school committee, to make certain that through our principles, they direct our policy, they infuse our budget and form our budget, and we deliver a product to our students, to our community, and tell this to you, our constituents, that this is how we will go about supporting our children, challenging our children, making them high
30
achievers,
seconds.
able to step into the world proudly.
Thank you. You can use this one here.
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah.
All right, so that was a good question to start. I'll start by sharing this. You know, this is a community with a long history of people who have stood up to do the right thing. They have fought to make a difference. Consensus is hard, right? But the end goal that we're aspiring to is beautiful, right? And that's what we should strive for. Take a look at this, the candidates lined up here, right? This is Concord. This is representative. Let's celebrate this. Yes, there is a lot of things we need to address, but let's not celebrate how far we've come. After saying that, I'll say there is a lot of work to be done at the school level. For the majority of the kids, the school system is amazing. We want to make sure that, as Michael pointed out, that any of the inequities that are being attributed to them, kids not feeling included, are addressed. As Alexa pointed out, that's where we invest money, so it does, in a way, come back to where we invest. People in our town have a lot to say. And I'll go back to what Paul said in the beginning. It's all about us as elected representatives listening to everyone, whether we agree with them or not. Let's show people grace. If we disagree, we should be able to communicate that in a way that is not I'm struggling with words here. We should disagree in a way that doesn't make the others feel bad, right? Let's understand where they're coming from and take that into our action. We want this to be a town where our kids, I still have 2 kids in the elementary school. I want this town to be a whole lot better for them than it is for us. And that is going to happen by us making incremental progress. Now, I mentioned a little bit about schools. This is not limited to schools, right? And this is clearly why you have all of us seated here. Concord as a whole has a lot of work to do to be more inclusive, to be more welcoming. When we look at the stats, and I have, teeny tidbit of stats here. There is a 14 to 15% discrepancy in students of color in the schools versus the educators. We want educators to be able to come into town. That's not necessarily just on the schools. It's on all of us as part of this community to make sure that this is welcoming, that we have houses that are affordable, that we have elected representatives that, make everyone feel comfortable to move into town. And I think that's time. I'll stop.
6 seconds left.
Grant, can I just ask a question? So it's interesting because your question asks about how do we support the core values of town? Do we know what those are? I mean, my guess is each of us in our own heart would say, yeah, I think I know, but is it something that we have agreed? Could it actually be written down? And if you could write it down, would most people agree? I don't know if there's an answer to this, but it's something, if we're gonna ask, how do we support core values, then maybe we should in some way figure out what that means.
Yeah, I think being able to identify what guides the nature of a space is going to be wholly important. Great points. Thank you all for the thought and the time on that. So we're going to move into something that perhaps is a bit more heavy, and we'll start with the select board side. Concord has seen intense debates over diversity, equity, and inclusion, from the rejection of renaming the middle school after Ellen Garrison to the removal of colonial-era markers deemed offensive to indigenous communities. Some argue that these efforts wrongly call out a proud history and impose unnecessary changes on a town that is already progressive, while others insist that Concord's wealth, ignorance, and fragility around matters of human difference make DEI work even more urgent. Do you believe Concord has a problem with racial, cultural, and economic exclusion? And if so, what concrete steps will you take to address or influence it? Or do you believe DEI efforts in town have gone too far? And if so, where would you draw the line? How would you justify your position to a community increasingly divided over these issues? And we'll start with Paul. And again, feel free to ask for a reminder if you need to hear it again.
Those are heavy issues. It's heavy. Glad to start. Before I start, let me, as far as core values for the community, and I'll answer your question in a second. When I started running for the select board, I was interested in what the duties of the select board were and what the roles and responsibilities. Then I came to realize there's some guiding principles for the select board, which I think for the town as well. And most of them fit into that. And I call these community sustainability. I didn't make up that phrase, but there are 5 principles of community sustainability. One is civic engagement and respect for each other. Second is financial sustainability. Third is economic vitality, environmental integrity, and social well-being. I think if you think about all the values that we have in Concord, they probably fit into those categories pretty well. The select board has to have an overview of all of them, and some take precedence over others at various times. But I think we have to be mindful of all of those. As far as the incidents of the past and the DEI Commission, I think there are always differences of opinion in the community. I think we've stepped over the line of incivility at some times, and stepped over those lines and defended positions rather than engage in dialogue. I think, I mentioned before, communication dialogue is vital. We can stay out of these adversarial positions by having not only dialogue at the time of crisis, but ongoing dialogue. So I think, I wasn't terribly familiar with all the details of those incidents. I think they do not reflect on our community. They may reflect on a few individuals in the community. I think our community as a whole was very upset of the adversarial relationships that evolved out of some of those, and perhaps some of the name calling that came from that. I think people have good intentions. The question is, how do they express those intentions? Sometimes people jump the gun and make decisions without process and without dialogue, and maybe that was some of the problem here. Sometimes decisions are made without transparency, and perhaps that was some of the problems here. I think all of those, lack of transparency, jumping the gun, unilateral decisions, no dialogue, those contributed to those problems. And I think We just have to be aware of those and step back and have more community dialogue, because I think those principles of sustainability do guide us all.
You have about 30 seconds left. Yeah, if you want to keep going, you have about 30, yeah. You don't have to.
I could sing, but
Okay, cool.
So I'm really glad to have this conversation. Is there work to be done? Always. I think as long as we're humans, there's work to be done. I mean, we're living in an era where you could argue that as a woman, I have fewer rights now than my mother did. I mean, of course there's work to be done on all these issues. I want open dialogue about these things. So when you're talking about removing the markers, I honestly don't know how I feel about it. I'm gonna be completely honest. Do I think that they are correct, the markers? No, of course, they represent a time and a point of view that is not how a lot of us think now. Do I think taking them down is the right thing? I honestly don't know. I'd love to have a discussion with people about that. I don't know if putting up something else in there and kind of helping educate people that way. At the same time, I kind of understand. I wouldn't want to walk around and be triggered by things. My background is Jewish. I mean, do I want a sculpture of Hitler in the middle? But like, of course not. On the other hand, you take it away, no one has these discussions. So I don't know. I would love to have more in-depth conversations about that. In terms of the naming of the school, same thing. I think my issue is, of course, not honoring a woman, a Black woman in history. It's the fact that it somehow became okay for people to say to people, you're being racist because you want it to be named Concord Middle School. Why that assumption? Maybe people actually really did believe that they wanted it to be named Concord Middle School. So I didn't like that animosity. I wouldn't have liked the animosity against people who wanted to name it the Ellen Garrison School either. But my real problem is, unless we're being authentic with each other and are willing to have real conversations and say, you know what, I may be wrong. I might be wrong about the markers. Maybe we should get rid of them. I'm not there yet. Unless we can have these conversations, I don't see what the point of any of this is.
And so in your role on select board, what do you think you could contribute to try to find ways to bridge that gap?
I think some of these, I'm not sure anyone said this in public, to be honest. It's kind of a controversial thing for me to say, and it may risk people not liking me to say it, but I believe that these are the conversations that we need to have without the fear that someone's gonna come and say, man, you were such a racist for what you said. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm trying to understand everything, and I think that dialogue without being scared, I mean, I'm a little intimidated by the DEI Commission because I think maybe I'm not doing enough, you know, and I don't like that feeling. I would rather have a very collaborative conversation, and I've already talked to you guys about this, you know, and I would hope to bridge those gaps a little bit. I think we're all, I mean, in terms of shared values, it's interesting what you say.
15 seconds.
You do make some assumptions. My assumptions are that diversity and equity and inclusion are very important to all of us, so.
Thank you.
I do agree that dialogue is important. I really do. But eventually we have to make decisions. We built a school, we had to decide what to name it. We had signs up, we had to decide whether we were going to, in fact, keep inaccurate information or correct the record. So I personally wanted the school to be named the Ellen Garrison School, but I also respected the process. And the process gave that decision clearly to the school committee, and I respected their right to make that decision. As far as the signs go, that was a decision made by the select board, and I voted to take down those signs because I thought we are the stories we tell. We should be truthful about the story of our ancestry, and having the truth out there is an important thing. So I voted to take down those signs, and just the other night we voted to correct the sign on Brewster's Hill Road. That was just frankly inaccurate. We had mixed up two Black men, so we fixed that sign. So I think it's important that when we learn the truth, we tell the truth. One of the things that comes up for me often when I think about DEI is, why should we do this? I mean, is it just really because we want to feel like we're good people? And yeah, we do. But there's a practical reason why. The reason we want to be a more diverse community is, one, I already said it, so that we tell accurate stories about who we are as a people, but also I think that if we think of ourselves as a field, and monocultures are vulnerable, and diversity leads to resilience. So if we want to be a resilient people, then we welcome and we're joyful with diversity. So that's how, I'm a very practical person, so when I try to think, like, why should I even care about this? Is it because it's somebody else's? No, it's my issue. And if I think of the future, I want to be resilient.
Thank you.
So, as I listened to the question, it seemed to me that part of it at least was DEI, are we doing enough or has it gone too far? I'm not sure that's really the question. To me, the question is, how do we do it? I think we all agree, yes, we should be doing this. It's how we approach it. And frankly, the issues we've seen over the last couple of years have really been about how that dialogue happens. And so there, to me, there should be some guiding principles. Absolute respect for one another and absolute respect for differing views, right? It's, I think, pretty fundamental to DEI is differing perspectives and views and respecting those. I think, and by the way, I want to say what Elizabeth said, it also means honesty. And frankly, when Elizabeth said she's somewhat intimidated by this topic, I am too. Because I feel like, what right do I have? I'm the middle-aged white guy, right? What have I lived through that's going to make me have empathy in the right places and at the right time? I hope that I can learn that and learn from other people, but I think that's where the dialogue comes in, right? So I think there's honesty. We have to sort of let the walls down a little bit if we're going to have that sort of honest and open discussion and admit when we're wrong, and I want to come back to that in a minute, and tell the truth, right? Then we can sit across from one another and really break the walls down and get things done. So one of the things I think this leads to is compromise. If we truly want to respect each other's perspectives and views, we end up at compromise, and that can be a good thing, right? Should be a good thing. It should not be a winner-take-all sort of thing. So on the school naming, and Michael Williams can attest to this, I sat down with, I think we had coffee.
Yes, we did.
As other folks for like an hour and a half, and I wanted to understand the perspective there. We left that meeting disagreeing. I certainly left that meeting, I would hope others did, feeling that at least we were both heard and we respected one another, at least respected our opinions. I believe that the school should have been, I said, hey, listen, there are some rules that I want to respect on both sides, and I felt that both sides
30 seconds.
were kind of digging in heels. I said, hey, listen, we have Peabody and Sanborn. Let's bring Ellen Garrison into the fold and honor all three of them in the naming of parts of the school or the school. But, let's do that. I wanted to see compromise there. On the signs, frankly, I don't see the value in covering up the bad things we've done. I would have liked to see some addendum to those signs. And frankly, the vote at the select board was to take them down for, quote, maintenance, and I think that was not taking leadership on that point.
Fair. So it sounds like so far we've heard a lot around transparency, honesty, engaging, and some critically tough conversations. To the school committee candidates, I will repeat. Concord has seen intense debates over diversity, equity, and inclusion, from the rejection of renaming the middle school after Ellen Garrison to the removal of colonial era markers deemed offensive to indigenous communities. Some argue that these efforts wrongly call out a proud history and impose unnecessary changes on a town that is already progressive, while others insist that Concord's wealth, ignorance, and fragility around matters of human difference make DEI work even more urgent. Do you believe Concord has a problem with racial, cultural, and economic exclusion? And if so, what concrete steps will you take to address or influence it? Or do you believe DEI efforts in town have gone too far? And if so, where would you draw the line? How will you justify your position to a community increasingly divided over these issues? And so we'll start with you, Alexa.
So, I've heard a lot about tone. And sometimes I think it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I know that that can be really challenging. I certainly don't nail that every time. And sometimes the way I talk to people might, get misinterpreted, or I get rubbed the wrong way, and that is okay. That is, as long as we're all putting a good faith effort into what we're doing. So, I'll echo some of what my colleagues or I don't know, the folks on the select board are saying. I think it starts with communication, and if people can be vulnerable enough to hear everybody, I think something that Joe said resonated with me. I don't think any community, large or small, and Concord's not that small, is ever going to find consensus on one issue, and I think that is okay. I think it's okay to disagree with our friends and neighbors, provided that at the end of the day, we respect their opinions. I personally don't see the DEI initiatives in our town going too far at all. I think especially I can speak more appropriately to the schools. Even though we prioritize DEI in everything from our teacher training to the curriculum we teach, we're always seeking to do more. Even when you look at statistics, we talk a lot about data and examining data to fuel our policies and our budget. DEI sometimes doesn't work with data, because in my opinion, if even one child feels like they don't belong in our community, that's like one too many. So we're always going to be iterating and progressing in this work, period. So it's never ending, it's never over, because I just don't think you're ever gonna have 100% belonging anywhere. So I do think that Concord is not immune as a community to prejudice and racism. Of course not. That would be silly. I mean, I would love to think that we're better than that, and Concord is, close to a utopia, but it isn't. We experience the same things as any other community. What struck me, however, something that I hadn't thought of in our DEI work, the most elevated and problematic thing that came out of the DEI survey was economic vulnerability, and people feeling like that was the biggest problem. So I think that we always should do more. We should always focus on doing more, and I think you're going to see that for years to come.
Thank you.
So, is Concord done? Have we achieved the balance and goals that we want? No. The road is continuing. DEI by design should make us all uncomfortable, because the road from 1952, when I was born, we didn't recognize gay people, and women had to adhere to Betty Crocker, and I wasn't going to be a surgeon. In fact, when I was a kid, no one really expected that I was going to be anything but an athlete, and I was a terrible athlete. So in the progress from there to here, a lot of people got uncomfortable, but a lot of people got together and decided, well, yeah, we can perfect a better union. And that's what happened in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and so maybe we hit a little bump now. Concord's no better than any other place in the country. My wife and I have lived all over the country, and everywhere we've lived, we expected there was going to be a problem. And everywhere we lived, there has been a problem. This and Concord has been the same. But our work toward resolving those problems, the ethos, the story that we tell about ourselves, should make us do that take that extra step, do the extra things to make a more perfect union. So yeah, Joe and I sat down for 2 hours in Nero. Mary and I sat down, and I have to apologize to you, Elizabeth, because we've just met, but we should sit down. Paul and I have sat down. Sandeep and I have sat down. I've sat with you. Actually, I've been on the other side of the table, but I've sat with you, and we've I'm trying to get on the side of the table, and you all can help me do that. But the point is to have the dialogue. Now let's talk about lowering the temperature. What are we going to celebrate in about 2 weeks? We celebrated Concord being all kinds of divisive for one thing, for freedom to expand our nation, to create our nation based on democracy. So I actually don't have a problem with being divisive. You need to do it politely, you need to do it eloquently, but you're doing it passionately for a reason. So yeah, I can do that. And I did that for a name. I would want to do that, bring a different perspective to the body that I would sit on, as I think all of us want to do. We want to bring a different perspective to the body that we sit on to make us a better union, to make us a better community. And we do that politely, eloquently, with a little flair. That's the job description. We would do it at this table for the betterment of our students, but ultimately for the betterment of our community. I did it.
It's always hard going after Michael. All right, so, I'm a first-generation immigrant, so I'll share with you my experiences outside of this country. Everything that I've lived through has definitely made me want to make Concord home, right? Yes, it's not perfect, but it's better than any other place that I've lived in. I have been accepted here. That is not to say there have been no instances where people have questioned whether I belong. But I've been accepted here, my family's been accepted here. This is our home. So yes. Now, your question was, where will we draw the line? I think the line has to be drawn in a way that everybody else is inside, right? So everyone who's living here, every child who's going to schools here feels like they belong, and that the system, the community is there to help them succeed. I wasn't actively involved in the school naming. I was a citizen, I was a parent, so I had been on the outsides looking and just expressing my opinions as a voter. It was distressing to see our community really divided and with some of the name calling that was going on. That's not what attracted me to this place. That's not what attracts anyone to this place. But to Michael's point, this is what we do. We are a community that's passionate, and we will speak up. I would draw the line there on giving people grace, and again, not calling people names, respecting their opinions, and listening to everyone. I feel the best way to make this a more accepting community is celebrating. Rose, when you gave your introduction, you mentioned a whole lot of events that we've going on in this town. I think that's how we learn about other cultures, about how we can celebrate each other, and about how any child who feels like they don't belong at least sees their culture, at least sees their I guess with the flags, with the Pride celebration, everyone feels like this is a community which they can call home. I don't think the work will ever be done. It's not going to be done in 3 years. It's not going to be done in 30 years, right? This is something we have to keep striving for. Whether or not I'm elected, I'll keep trying to do that, right? And I hope all of you will too, right? This is not just for these elected representatives. It's for all of us to make sure that the next generation feels more belonging in this town than the current generation does.
Thank you so much. Before we move on, we're going to have one of our candidates actually going to be stepping away, and so. Oh, sorry, I forgot to have the microphone. Sorry. So before we continue moving on, we're going to have one of our candidates stepping out. So we're going to give a 3-minute opportunity to kind of close your remarks.
I won't take 3 minutes. Unfortunately, I do have a conflict I have to run to, but that I let Rose know ahead of time. So I won't take 3 minutes, I don't think. I'll just go back to some of the things we said about, in response to that last question, this idea of changing that dialogue, making sure we respect one another and respect those differing views, letting down the walls, the guards, so that we can actually, sort of let everybody see our vulnerabilities. It seems like that's the way we can work together instead of working against one another, and recognizing that we're going to have to compromise at times. Now, I mentioned one thing when I was answering the question. I said, admitting when you were wrong, and I wanted to address one thing. So I wrote a letter about a year ago about the school naming, and talking about, the message I was trying to get across was this idea that we needed compromise. and that I thought both sides were digging their heels in, and that was leading to this sort of divisive, bad dialogue. I believe that that's still the right message. The one thing I want to say is, admitting when you're wrong, is that I realized after someone wrote a letter in the Bridge a couple weeks ago about that, I went back and read it and realized, yeah, that tone was not the right tone that I wrote in. I got pulled into that same thing, and I was name calling. I said bullies, and so I just want to say that this is the kind, I hope this is the kind of thing I can be vulnerable and share with you and say, you know what? I think part of what I wanted to do was right, but maybe the way I did it was wrong. And I had certainly learned, there's a great behavioral economist named Daniel Kahneman who said that most people don't like to be proven wrong. And he says, I like being proven wrong because it means I've learned something. So I would say that I've learned something here. And I think that moving forward, that dialogue and respect is the way we have to go. And I'm sorry I have to leave early.
Thank you so much. All right. Moving along with our questioning. This next question will be for the select board candidates only. Many local community organizations have launched initiatives to address isolation among older adults. How would you enhance intergenerational programs that promote mental well-being and social connection? And we'll start on the closer end. We'll start with you. Yep.
So I'm just thinking about what we do already. So my father is in his 80s, and we have a band that he's played at Trails End Cafe for a long time, and now they're called the Terry Tones, and they play upstairs. There's a little plug. They play upstairs on our mezzanine. They're all in their 80s and 90s. Some of them are in their 90s, and they come every weekend and play, and I love it for so many reasons. So I am very connected intergenerationally. My father was just out putting up signs for me. He might have put out too many, but this is an issue that's really important to me because I have my parents here, and we're doing this. I also, I think when I mentioned, I don't know if I talked to you guys about this. So I'm really into food, obviously, because I own a restaurant. I own Concord Market. And we did this thing during COVID called Culture, Cuisine, and Community. And since no one was traveling, we invited everyone to submit recipes from wherever their background was. We brought them in to teach us how to cook that food, and then we sold it. We had these meals. So I told you, Rose, that my Indian neighbor's father said we didn't do it as well as he cooked it. But that's what we tried. But the point was that it was so lovely. And I just said to these guys, I'm like, what I would really like to see is a bunch of grandmothers cooking some food from all over the world. I just have to bring this back to food, because to me, that is community, that's culture, and that's bringing people together. In terms of other bringing people together, I mean, that, to me, that's it. I guess it's food and music if I'm thinking about it. We talk about infrastructure and how older people can move around and in town and improvements that can be made. I'm lucky, we're in a new building, we have ramps, we have, we have handrails. But I think that those have been identified as some issues around town, that people have been saying that the doors aren't big enough at Main Street and there aren't enough railings to hold on to for older people or disabled people. I would love to see, now that we know that, and we got a grant to research that we help the businesses along Main Street to put those improvements into place, because it is hard to get anything permitted in town, and if you're a business on Main Street, it is especially hard. So if we identify these as issues for the older generation, then we have to follow through. Maybe get some grants to help these business owners put these improvements in, and then maybe help them get through Historic Districts Commission and the other permitting authorities that are difficult. So I guess that's it. Would you like
Thanks.
to go next? I'm not the moderator, so.
No, Paul, you got it. Paul, we'll go Paul.
Yep. Okay, this way.
Okay.
Fair,
Pamela.
sounds good.
We're going to do what Pamela suggests.
Got you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, intergenerational. We have places in town where we do have a lot of intergenerational activity, and one of them is my favorite places is the Beatty Center. So you go to the Beatty Center, and there are little kids in the little pool, there are high schoolers in, swimming laps, there's people in the dive well, there are older people like me that are bobbling around in the warm water. It's an intergenerational place. Our rec commission also has many intergenerational programs at the Hunt Center. So we already have a lot of programs in town that are across all generations. One of the ideas that I came up with recently, or one of the things I saw, was the 250th had an essay contest for high school students, which really worked well as far as getting the high school students involved in the 250th celebration. And I was talking with someone who's a select board member in the town of Lincoln, and we were talking about inclusivity and what is Lincoln doing around improving inclusivity, and she gave me some ideas, and one of them is to have a high school student on the DEI commission. And I'm thinking, that's a great idea. Maybe we should have a high school student on some of our other commissions as well, because they've got great ideas, they've got energy. I don't know if they're going to have the patience with some of our open meeting laws, but they will bring an idea that I think we need and a freshness. So I think we already have some intergenerational programs that I take advantage of and many people do. I think we could broaden and bring more high school students into some of our committees. And what was my other idea? I forget. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Not bad. I think we're good to go to Paul now. We good.
Thank you. The Recreation Department does have a lot of things going on. I'm on the Recreation Commission. I'll take no credit for that. It's the Recreation Director and Recreation Department that have developed these programs over a long period of time. The Recreation Commission supports the Director. I think they're kind of, when I think of this issue, I think short-term and long-term. Short-term, I think inclusion, and Mary touched on this, I think having older people and younger people participating on the same committees, having this cross-fertilization on the Council on Aging, for example, have cross-fertilization on a number of these committees, on the Cultural Resources Commission committee. There are a lot of opportunities for older people and younger people to kind of mesh in our town governance. So that's something we can do pretty quickly. I think we have a Transportation Advisory Committee, and they are in the process of looking at how to improve transportation throughout the town. Mobility, getting older people all around town to various venues is a really important thing. I think Council on Aging does a good job. They have vans. You can call up and get a ride. But I think improving transportation mobility in town is really important. And we're waiting for that report, and hopefully the Select Board can take some action on that. Longer term, affordable housing can be part of the solution. When we think about affordable housing, we think about 5-story buildings, and we think about other ways of getting our subsidized housing index above normal. But I'm thinking of different types of small developments. Developments like Mill Run over in West Concord, small houses where you can have multi-generational owners. You can have people who are looking to break into the market, and that's a big issue in affordability, that just houses aren't available. You have older people downsizing. So if we can develop and use some of this land that we have coming up, whether it's 2229 or MCI Concord, to think about those planned residential developments with affordable housing, mixed generational communities. That's not something we're going to do in the next few months, but it's something we should plan for the future as a goal to get those intergenerational communities in our plans. Last thing is sort of my one of my pipe dreams long ago from the 2229 Main Street is a community center. I mean, and so we cannot afford a big capital community center right now, but we should think long-term about how can we improve Harvey Wheeler. Harvey Wheeler is Council on Aging. It's a small place, people love it, but it's not an intergenerational facility. If we can think about a community center with a senior center, which has recreation. I saw it in Boulder, Colorado, and I saw that facility, and that's why it's in the reuse report that my committee put together as a vision for, along the lines of Beatty, how we get intergenerational recreation, community center. So lots of things we need to think about, some short-term, some long-term.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. So now moving to the school committee side, one of the great tools that can be utilized to expose young people to diversity is bringing in diverse minds. What can be done in regard to the retainment and retention of a global, multifaceted educator? What can be done from the school committee side to attract and retain a more diverse teaching staff? And then what can you all do from the school committee to help support current teachers and professional development and getting access to different teaching techniques that can support our growing student population? We'll start at the end this time. I got a cycle. We got a cycle. Okay. We'll go with it.
All right, so as, again, someone who's on the outside, I can offer up some ideas. The school committee currently probably has explored some of these. But I think I mentioned early on, right? We have a discrepancy in the percentage of students that we have that are diverse versus the educators that we have. So this is a reality that we need to address. Making the community more welcoming. The select board mentioned affordable housing. Those are all options to bring in and attract more diverse candidates that want to be educators. But again, that's not easy, right? We need to make sure that this is a community that is welcoming for everyone. I would say that we can learn from what other communities have done. And some of that is, making sure that stipends are available for teachers that maybe don't live in the district to come work here. But again, those are challenges that we need to address. The one thing, the initial part of your question makes me think of this, right? How can we expose kids to more diverse thoughts? That having educators here is one thing, but we can always bring in enrichment programming as part of, say, the parent-teacher group, or I'm on the board of the Concord Ed Fund. I know they support initiatives that strive to bring in folks that have, maybe a lecturer, maybe somebody who talks not just to the students, but to the community about how to expand their views and expose them to ideas that are not just in the community, but maybe global best practices. So there are a lot of tools at our disposal. We just have to make it a priority and try and, again, to the point earlier, right, spend the resources, spend the money on it to make sure that we actually strive to do that.
So I'm going to do two things, and I'm going to change up your question. I'll admit that
Sure,
right up
certainly.
front. I got to push back first on dialogue. Nowhere in our history has change happened without pointed, sometimes unpleasant dialogue. Stonewall didn't bring change peacefully. The civil rights movement that I grew up in didn't make change peacefully. And so the dialogue can be pointed. It might be divisive, but we need to listen. 1 point. Second point, making a move, making things change takes leadership. Most of us are long of tooth and gray of hair. You remember when Truman desegregated our armed forces? People were upset about that. You remember when LBJ stood for the civil rights movement, and he knew he was going to lose the Democratic Party in the South, but he did it anyway. He demonstrated leadership. So it takes having pointed dialogue. It takes demonstrating leadership, both at the select board level and at the school committee level, to make change. Now, I went to private schools from 3rd grade on, and I'm actually trying to remember a black face that instructed me. Point being is that I know the conversation has been, black educators are hard to find. Black surgeons are hard to find too. Black astronauts are hard to find. Doesn't it seem like we found some? So to the answer, folks like that are hard to find. Look for them in places where they are. So you can solve that problem. But we can have diversity without having to look in different places. We have a program that started 50 years ago in Concord that we have a 48-year history with. It's called Medco. Now, you all might know that there's been some difficulty with that program now. So why don't we investigate, interrogate the people that have left and find out why? Why don't we talk to the families that disbanded their Medco parent-teacher group because of the concerns that they didn't feel were being addressed? Why don't we talk to them and make more than budget or policy changes, make physical, present, palpable changes that rebuild the trust? Because one of the things that Medco was about was educational diversity, bring the richness of Boston to the richness of Concord, let them meld together and make great things.
30 seconds.
So we don't need to look. Yeah, we need to go where Black educators are, find them, and encourage them to come here. And actually, at the select board level, encouraging them to come here might be a job of work, because I actually had to try and encourage Black residents, Black fellows to stay in Boston. And they wanted to sort of, why would I do that when I can go to Atlanta, I can go to Texas, I can go to California? So there are things we need to do on all levels.
That's time.
And we can do that if we do it together.
Fair. Alexa, you got it.
Since I seem to be terrible with the timing, I want to tell you all about an anecdote from our most recent teacher negotiation with our Concord Carlisle Teachers Union. As you probably are all well versed, our school budgets are very heavily scrutinized. We have had 2 town meetings, I think, in a row where our budgets were not at guidelines. So we have been we were incredibly cognizant of that as we entered our negotiations with our teachers at the high school. However, they came to us with one of their main proposals, which were a series of 5-figure stipends. So like if you are a stipended, soccer coach, which is not a insignificant amount of time, you get like $2,500. So these were a major deviation from our normal stipends. They were all 5-figure stipends, and they wanted each department in our main subject areas to have a stipended position, to have teacher-to-teacher interactions and looking for diverse candidates to teach at our high school. So when you think about that, that is like a 5, almost 6-figure investment. And initially, we kind of balked. Like, oh my God, how are we selling this to the finance committee? And also, too, it ended up being significantly more than that, because in taking those stipends, they would reduce a section or 2 of their classes to focus on that. So then you'd have to hire more teachers to fill in the gaps. So it was a significant investment. But the more we heard from the teachers and the educators, they articulated that the HR folks that are going to places like Howard University to attract candidates, we are posting our jobs in very different places than we did, say, 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't enough to have your HR representative go and say, hey, come to Concord. They wanted 2 things. They wanted an educator-to-educator conversation because they felt like they could make a more compelling case to fellow educators, number 1. And number 2, because we do have diverse staff of color, gender expression, having people who looked like the people that they were trying to attract would also help, right? So ultimately, we heard them, they heard us, and we put those stipends in place this year. So they are in place this year. I'm hoping to see some tangible change and our ability to attract more teachers of color because of it.
15 seconds.
And again, I think this is an example of the school district willing to be hearing feedback from all of our different constituencies and taking quick and decisive action to make it happen.
Thank you. So this will be the last question that we have from the general questions. Do we have no cards after this? Okay, cool. So after this, we'll go to the no cards. Gotcha, I gotcha. All right, so this one will be for the select board. Given the rise in hate crimes across Massachusetts, including incidents of racism, anti-Semitism, transphobia, and homophobia, how would you collaborate with local law enforcement and community organizations to proactively address and reduce occurrences like these in Concord? What policies would you advocate for to educate members of the community about hate speech and create a more inclusive environment? And Mary, we'll start with you.
Thank you. This is important. I believe that the select board, through working through the town manager, we have one of the most professionally trained police forces in the state. We have some officers here with us today, and Chief Mulcahy comes to the select board, or whoever is the chief, but Chief Mulcahy comes to the select board and updates us on what types of training they're getting. So I don't train the police force. What I do is I make sure that they are professional and that they've been trained and they're sensitive to the issues that are facing us today. We also have a Human Rights Council, which can mediate issues among people. So the select board doesn't get involved in these things directly, but we make sure that we have the right people in place and the people have the support and the training to do their job. Can I use my time to talk about something else? Oh, good. I want to key off on something that Paul said earlier about housing, and I think that housing is, to me, pivotal as far as helping us meet our DEI goals, and I'm glad you brought that up. If we really want diversity in town, we've got to have diverse housing stock, because people across the different dimensions of diversity, whether it's age, whether it's sexual identity, whatever the dimensions are. We heard from Alexa that economic vulnerability is something that people worry about. Housing, to me, is the answer to that. In order to make our town more diverse, we need more housing. I'm really glad to hear Elizabeth say that we have so many diverse people working at Concord Market. I wonder how many of them can afford to live here. So the more we do around, especially workforce housing, I think the more we will attain our diversity goals. So I wanted to kind of say yes to that. So is my time up?
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to that question, because I don't. But I know my experience with the police is very different from some other people's experience with the police. And I've heard this from people, different color skin from me, that have a very different reaction to the police force. So I'm not going to sit here and say I know the answer. I think this requires all sitting down and being really honest. And in terms of what the select board can do, I mean, Mary's right, the select board can't do everything, but can foster a tone, can have discussions, and can really push back, and maybe even, I mean, it's a great point. Maybe you could get everyone in the room. So I think, again, it's the collaboration, it's the civil discourse, and I'm gonna use my time also to respond to Michael. Because I'm not saying there isn't going to be debate. Of course there's going to be debate. But if one side is scared to say that they disagree with anything, then there is no debate. Then you're not changing minds. You're not expanding people's minds. You're just kind of in an echo chamber. So I don't disagree with making people uncomfortable talking about things, but listen to both sides, which I maybe is not what you're saying, Michael's not to listen to both sides, but I don't want it to sound like I'm saying no one should say anything controversial. Quite the opposite. We should all be a little bit uncomfortable, and I think that's okay.
I think I remember the question.
I know, we did a good job steering away.
No.
Test call.
Do whatever you want.
No. So I had the privilege of being with Simon Cataldo the other day. So Simon is the co-chair of this Massachusetts Special Commission on Anti-Semitism, and he spoke at Kerem Shalom very passionately on the problem. This isn't competition, but 51% of all hate speech is related to anti-Semitism, and we only have 2% of the population. It's not competition here. So anti-Semitism and racism have a lot in common that is fueled by hate. It's also fueled by ignorance. I don't want to talk so much about the far end of the process, which is the police enforcement. By the time we get there, the problem, we have to figure out what the incident is. I want to kind of go up the chain a little bit and talk about how not just the select board, but others in town need to shine a bright light on these incidents, whether it's anti-Semitism or racism. They can't be swept under the rug. And I'm using that's a hard statement for, not revealing what actually happens at the schools, in the restrooms, whether it's swastikas or hate speech or anti-LGBT speech. There are personal issues. I know the schools have to be very mindful of that. But I think the community needs to be aware of these things. I'm not talking about community shame. But the community has to take ownership for a lot of this and figure out why is this happening. Is it education? Is it not speaking enough? It's a very small minority. We are a very civil community. And what we see in these incidents is very isolated. But I think we need to be very much aware of it. We need to figure out why is it happening. We need to educate our kids. We need to bring that home. But we need to be aware of these incidents. And I think shining a bright light, the select board may not have a role depending on that incident. I'm just talking about the town in general. That's how we're going to fight these things and respond to them. Yes, the police can take care of it, but I'd like to go as far upstream as we can on this problem.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, so far for your vulnerability, your courage, and engaging the topics in the conversation. Can we get to the?
We have
Yeah.
some questions, and I suspect
Certainly.
you'll be surprised, but that there are some more.
That's okay.
Any good questions? I can collect.
So I'm just trying to get you a question so you can get something before you go.
Yeah, he's an educator, he's got it. Me either, I'm not 30 years old.
So we have a school committee candidate question, just because we have short time with one of our candidates. If you look at the school committee meetings, the members all sit there staring at their laptop computers. Would you support having people close their laptops and engage in more discussion with one another?
Oh my God, yes. We generally do that to ensure that people who raise their hand, at least during public comment, that they get acknowledged, because we do have hybrid meetings. And oftentimes we're looking at slide decks that have been shared with us from the administration, looking at information. They also go up on our screens, but that involves us turning around. So yes. I am, I'll sort of riff on this question too, with respect vis-a-vis screens. I remember I met Rose a million years ago because I had started an organization called Concord Promise that sought to unite parents in discourse about the dangers of teenagers and cell phone use and social media. We really sparked a lot of conversation in the community. We recognize that overuse of screens and staring at monitors is entirely disruptive to childhood. This gentleman from NYU, who's an expert on the topic, calls it the great rewiring of childhood in America, and it's terrible. He focuses on that, and screen time and screen addiction gets a lot of attention with the teenage population. But I don't think we're immune either. And I think that we're all comfortable looking at our screens. But yeah, and actually one thing that Tracy and I did a couple years ago was, if you had gone to our meetings 3 years ago, we sat in this big circle. We looked like, I always think about, what's that show, or not show, that book, the Kafka book, where the guy goes on the trial. And it's like the never-ending trial. And we looked like the weird creeps in the trial, like in this big, big setup. And so Tracy and I thought, like, pushing everyone together, still a lot of us, so the table's still kind of big, but just creating intimacy by changing the setup of the table so that we were encouraged to make eye contact, so that we were encouraged to lean in, was I think, trying to achieve exactly what the heart of this question is at. So yeah, we'd have to like rework maybe the way we look at our information, and then we have sustainability goals. Do we really want to be printing everything? I don't know. There's not an easy answer, but I am always encouraging people to look up and make eye contact. I think it's really lost on this next generation, but we can do a good job at role modeling it as well. So whoever wrote that question, I'm into it.
Thank you. So 2 simultaneous questions for school committee candidates. The first is, how do you ensure that kids truly belong going beyond a survey?
Do we get to answer that?
Do you want to jump on that?
No, the previous one.
Oh, sure. Do you want to? Okay, fine.
I would definitely do so.
Fair. So would you support having people close their laptops and engage with more discussion?
Yeah, no, discussion is great. I take notes on the laptop. Everything that's been said, I want to know what's going on so I can go back and look at it. I absolutely would like to keep using the laptop, or some electronic medium. If not, what I'll have to do is, write my chicken scratch and then go back home and sit and transcribe it. Sometimes I can read it, sometimes I cannot. So I think I'll have to differ on that one. So.
You're younger than me. you have the better relationship with technology.
I'm older than both y'all, and I would not, the deal is that school committee meeting, like the select board meeting, it's a business meeting, and there's business to be conducted. So, and I'm sitting in the peanut gallery, and I have my iPad open because I'm looking at the agenda, and I'm looking at the hot items that come up so I can follow what they're talking about. So for the business meeting, I think the business should be able to be conducted. And I would also be on your side because I would wager after 30 years of being a surgeon, my writing is worse than his. So I'd want to be able to take track of things and do the business. But there are other things, if I have the time, I'd like to sort of push back on. Paul, thank you for your vulnerability. The conversation with the community to answer those questions, Elizabeth, would be divisive. It would be loud, it would be raucous, but from that free interplay of ideas, we'd come to a decision. And so I don't think you can say our conversation should always not be demeaning. Our conversation always should not be violent. Our conversation should always not call people out. But it's not going to be polite. And through that, we will get to a decision. Now, to get to that decision, we'll take leadership. Because after you've heard all sides, somebody has to sit up and say, I understand this, and I know what these people said, I know what my constituents said, but my principles tell me that we need to do this. Truman did that, Johnson did that, Barack did that, Clinton did that. So I would want to sit down, hear the raucous dialogue, take all the information, and make a decision for the good of our community. So that what has to be done. So yes, I would keep the computers. I would
30
make
seconds.
certain there was dialogue and make decisions.
Sounds good. This question was, you can feel free to go whenever you're ready. This is for everybody. The problem with the Ellen Garrison naming compromise, quote, was that a, quote, compromise was deemed necessary despite widespread support for the name. Do you agree? And I'll leave this to anybody who wants to take it first.
I'll take it because I
ahead.
gotta go.
Yep, you got it.
Oh, and I have a mic. So, people ask me about this a lot because I ended up sort of, as chair of the school committee, ended up sort of being the face of the process that we undertook to examine names for the Concord Middle School. I really and truly believe that compromise is a product of good government. When I look at what my kids see on TV at the national level, politics has become a zero-sum game of winners and losers. No one wants to compromise. That's what they see in their leaders today, and I think it's a shame and it's awful. This naming received a lot of attention in town, no doubt. But I've said before, there wasn't like entirely consensus on this issue. We had people who really were advocating for different names. So for me, I am proud of our willingness to compromise and honor the constituents, which were predominantly parents who wanted to keep the name of Concord Middle School, which felt very intentional for them as their kids wanted to represent their community, versus another population of folks that really felt strong convictions about naming the school after Ellen. Both of those groups had meaningful perspectives. And I think at the end of the day, when I can go home to my children and say, you know what, not everybody won totally, but we all kind of won. And that is how communities band together, and that is how people work together. And there are so few instances in government where somebody wins. It's all about compromise. So to me, at the end of the day, that was a good governance. That was good governance in action, and I stand behind that. And I'm proud to tell my kids that story.
Thank you.
Can I jump on this too?
Of course.
Yeah. Beside this specific incident, I just want to talk about compromise. And so my experience, so I've done a lot of litigation work and expert testimony. People start out with entrenched issues, with entrenched positions. It's never a good idea to kind of go to trial. Sometimes you have to. Settlements usually come out of those situations. That's a compromise that's in litigation. In town work, I've led a task force, the 2229 Main Street Task Force. We had to decide whether we were going to advise the select board to acquire that site. We sat down with 9 people, and there were opinions all over the place, pitted opinions that we should never touch it, all over the map. It took us a while to get all the issues on the table, but at the end, we came to consensus. We sort of compromised on some issues. I think leadership is all about bringing things to compromise. I think in this particular incident, I think compromise is always preferable, because once you hear pitted opinions, whether you're a mediator or whether you're on the select board, you have to hear those opinions, and if they're equally balanced, you have to come up with some kind of compromise. I think there's situations where you can be very principled and there is no compromise. I think in those cases, you have to stick to your guns. There are situations on the select board where, for example, I might be on the 4-to-1 side, be on the 1 vote. I have to be very principled on that. But the select board and other teams have to kind of, as teamwork, have to come together. So on major issues, whether it's the naming of the school, or whether it's other issues coming up before us, I think it's the role of leadership to bring things to a settlement or a compromise, if possible, at all times. That's my personal opinion on that.
Thank you.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, feel free to comment.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. This question came up earlier tonight, and I think I said that I personally wanted the school to be named the Ellen Garrison School, but I also said that the decision is the school committee's decision, and I respected that. And I really believe that the school committee and the select board should be independent of each other and follow the right process. I don't want the school committee running the town. I don't want the select board running the schools. So I guess I'm wondering, if you're asking the select board, do we believe in compromise? Yes, we believe in healthy compromise dialogue. But in this particular instance, I believe that the process was clear. We consulted with the law, and I respect that process.
Thank you.
I,
Of course. Yeah.
I'll
feel-
let you go.
So again, this question was asked earlier today. So my views on that I've already stated. I will share one thing. My kids, when they go to school at Thoreau, or when next year one of them will go to school at the Ellen Garrison Building at the Concord Middle School, it doesn't matter what the name outside says. It doesn't matter that it's the Ellen Garrison Building or it's Thoreau School. I want my kids to go to school and make sure that they feel belonging, right? We've shared this earlier. The name is a big step towards representation, but it is not the be-all, end-all. We need to solve the fact that there is a substantial number of kids in the schools that don't feel that belonging. I would like to focus the efforts on that.
I agree with that. But I have a slightly different take on things. I'd start out first by saying that, and I'm quoted on this in the bridge, that it was never just about the name. It's never just about the name. It's about the ethos that this woman instills, the life that she led and the things that she did. I would want that to be infused into the building to make the children that come through that building, that eventually go to CCHS, come out at the other end as good citizens, able to move through proudly a multicultural world. So that said, it's not just about the name, but compromise is great when compromise is on the table. To my understanding, our community's legislative body, the first night of town meeting, decided on a budget. They overruled FinCom for that. And it was a legitimate and respected vote. On the second night of town meeting, the constituents of our community, the constituents actually that will give us authority to sit on the school committee and make decisions. So those constituents, all of our community, the 25% that have children in school and the 75% that do not, all of our constituents got together and one voice said they like the Ellen Garrison Middle School as a name. And so if you're listening to your constituents, the community writ large, the answer was there. So I'm also proud of the fact that the voices of all the Concordians that stood up and made their voices known were listened to the extent that the compromise we're lauding, that was the amendment that was unanimously defeated, that compromise did result in the name Ellen Garrison being attached to the building that is now our middle school. I'm proud of that. It's not important to me that the name is the Ellen Garrison building at Concord Middle School versus Ellen Garrison Middle School. What is important to me, though,
30
is that her
seconds.
ethos is going to be infused into the building and will create better citizens at the other end.
Thank you. Another general question for all candidates. How would you take advantage in working with those citizens who have expertise to offer but are not interested in sitting on a committee or running for an office? So how would you engage the community with the expertise without them being officially attached to a committee or a board?
So I'm on a committee right now. I'm on the MCI Advisory Committee, and I was on the zoning board for 2 terms, and I already reach out to people independently because I think it's really important. And you know, I hope that there is actually expertise on the select board as well, and I hope people reach out there as well. I want to say this in a politically correct way. I'm not sure we are using all the expertise that we have, and I hope that we listen more. On the MCI Advisory Committee, there is so much expertise, and we probably haven't listened to it as much as we can. So I would hope we open ourselves up a little bit, foster some more dialogue. I think the select board has done a good job. I think there's more work to be done. I know, you have a select board member who is head of green initiatives at National Grid, and that would be a great person to talk to about green initiatives. As far as I know, there hasn't been a lot of outreach, so that kind of thing I think could be fostered more.
I want to answer an easy question since I have the hard ones. For me, this is an easy one. Well, first of all, we're in a community where we're small enough, we know each other, and so if there's a particular expertise needed, surely we're going to find that person. Now, that person may not want to be on a committee or a task force, but there are many examples where we ask that person to come in and sit in on this particular meeting, give us advice. I'm on the Warrens Pond task force right now, and we've had several people come in to give us information on hydrogeology, wetlands, and other expertise. They don't have to be on the committee, but they're graciously giving their advice and time and expertise. And so we can find those people, we can value those people. They don't have to serve on committees, but the committees have to be knowledgeable enough to figure out what's the right expertise that's needed. So I think there's lots of good examples where that works in town.
Quickly, first of all, we need to understand that we already have over 400 people on committees. So we already have a lot of expertise already, engaged in committees. But we do go outside sometimes, and I want to shout out to our honored citizen who's going to be honored this Sunday, is a man named Sandy Smith. And he's a person that we reached out to when we were trying to figure out how to structure the debt for the middle school. So he was a bond trader. And so that's a really good example of when we have something that's kind of an esoteric question, we know where the expertise is in town. We went to Sandy and he helped us look at different alternatives as far as how would we issue these bonds so that we would level the payment to, or level the load on the property tax. And I don't want to get too technical, but we do go out and get expertise when we need it. He is our honored citizen, and we're going to have a ceremony on Sunday.
That was my question, but that's not what I meant by that question.
And what did you mean by the question?
Well, the answers show that they don't understand the question.
Okay.
It's not somebody who's a scientist or somebody who can do an accountant. It's civic engagement citizens who, I'm not an expert in science, but I know a lot about seeing where things are not connecting. And Rhoda can attest for that. She's known me for a long time. And from that, as a designer and an artist, and I've also done marketing, I see these and I do research and I read about all the committees and things that are getting, and I find the result. And yet this, in 46 years, is not good in this town. I'm talking about civic engagement expertise and using citizens who want to give their time. I just turned 80. I'm not going to sit on a committee, and I'm not going to run for selectmen. I have a lot of knowledge, and with the recreation, for a year ago, brought them information that wasn't done, still nothing. I go around in circles. I talked to our town manager 2 years ago, something Paul mentioned about a community center. Mary Shorey was the one that got us the community center. We were going to sell it for an apartment building. I tried 2 years ago to tell her, it's not just council on aging. It was meant to be a community center. Where did I get? Nowhere. I spoke to people. That's what I mean by accepting civic engagement, and Elizabeth knows that. I've spoken to her about this.
Yeah.
So the answer shows that our town doesn't understand this.
No, I think,
And also,
Mary,
I don't understand that when a person speaks up, I've spoken up, and I've gotten called troublemaker by somebody at the top, a pushy New Yorker, and I get pushback for 46 years. I'm still speaking up, and if we lose the power to, if we have that we're afraid to speak up, we're going to lose a democracy. And I agree with Michael and Elizabeth on that. If I hadn't spoken up, people come up to me after town meeting, and somebody I spoke up with to me, they said, "You're the same Mary."
Yeah.
But the other people like me, you know what? They moved. Frank Kehoe, who killed herself.
Your name is Mary? Your name is Mary?
Mary.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Can,
I hear you.
can I answer Mary's
you.
question now that I understand it?
Yeah, say that.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Okay, because I have spoken to Mary about this. And it's a frustration that you share with other people, and we've heard it in other places, that people do not feel like they are listened to.
And I know you know it, I know you understand it.
Right, and and the thing, full disclosure, Mary wrote me a really long handwritten memo about things that she thinks should be changed in town, and I happen to agree with her on this one. You talked about there being coffees, and the people just come, it used to be more engagement, and the select board would reach out and actually have conversations. I think that is a fantastic idea. I have learned so much just even on this campaign trail that I would not have known. Talking to more people, the better. When I mentioned earlier about MCI, I talk to people who I know have expertise in things, so I'll make a personal connection and reach out to citizens who aren't on committees. But to have people come to me, I wouldn't have known that you knew all of this before I met you. So I think that for the select board's part, and I don't think it's pie in the sky. I think it's very easily done to have community coffees and reach out to constituents. Do you want to say anything?
That's all good. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this question has come up twice, and I think that it's likely appropriate that the people up here can address it in two different forms. Essentially, the question is, in terms of optics of equity, do you think it's a conflict of interest for two current members of the school committee to endorse two of the three running candidates? Or in other form, do you agree with the new practice of sitting committee members endorsing candidates? And that's open to all.
I'll go first and I think it's more than two. I think everyone on the current school committee has endorsed me, so I'll take that. This is tricky, right? Because I moved into town 7-8 years ago, and 3-4 years of that was COVID. So pretty much everyone I knew is parents of kids at Thoreau, and those who lived at Thoreau Hills. So when and as you pointed out, right, when I want to do community engagement, I want to step up and do this, I met a whole lot of people. I asked every single one that I met for an endorsement, right? Some of them gave me their endorsements, some of them did not. And all that's fine, because after the election, if I win, obviously this is a role in which I'll have to work with the other existing members and make decisions that'll affect, I guess, everybody who goes to school. It's not just the folks who endorse me. Now, an endorsement does not mean that everyone agrees 100% with what you say. It's just an indication that these are folks that you're willing to work with. I believe that if elected to the committee, I will have healthy disagreements with all of them, right? I will, again, you saw Alexa and I disagreed on one thing, and Michael and I have disagreed on other things. If we get elected, I will continue to disagree. I will advocate for the people that have elected me. There are 3 things that I stand for, and hopefully I'll mention those in my closing statement. I want every single child in the school district, I'll go back to that, to be welcome in our community. And if that means me asking endorsements from everyone, happy to do that.
You don't have to.
I could.
If you would like to, you don't have to.
It's just simple, and Sandeep said himself, folks that you're willing to work with. And I guess I would, if the optics are the concern that you're seeing read, then the optics are, as you said, the folks that you're willing to work with. Is the implication, and not that you're implying, but the casual observer, what is intuitively obvious to the most casual observer, do they sit back and say, well, I can work with them, but not them? And so I would say, and if I'm in the position to be asked for an endorsement when I get seated, I'm confident. But if I'm in the position to be asked for an endorsement, I'd say, I'm sitting on the board you're running for, I can't do that. and you know, come get with me, and we can work together, get elected, we can work together, and then we can work, but I would want you not to necessarily endorse anyone, but you can do what you want. So that's my position on that, because it can leave the most casual observer to suspect that, oh, those people you can work with. That may not be where you're coming from, but the most casual observer might think that. And I don't want that perception of impropriety.
Sure. So I'll give you one opportunity to just respond, and then we're going to move in.
Yeah, I'll share, right? English is not my first language. So what I implied, and again, is that I am willing to work with everyone. This is not a statement that anybody who endorsed me is willing to only work with me, right? So there's a distinction there. I am willing to work with anyone who's endorsed me and work with people who've not endorsed me, who are not going to vote for me, who are going to vote for the others. And that's fine. We are, in the end of the day, in this together. We're all still part of Concord, and we all have to keep doing our best. This is, again, we're part of DEI, so I've mentioned, right? To make Concord a more welcoming town, to make this a better town for all of us, to make stronger schools and stronger community, it's not just on the committee members, it's on all of us.
All right, so I think we are getting close to the end of this function. I'm just gonna, what's up? I'm getting signals from the crowd, what's up?
Bessie said they would allow me to rephrase my question.
Oh, certainly,
Thank you so much.
sure.
So, should I have the mic where?
If you want, you can say it better than I could.
Thank you. So I'll just sit here. I'm Tanya Galis, and I asked the question about whether there was a problem with the fact that a compromise was needed for the naming of the school. And various candidates replied that compromise is necessary, compromise is good, compromise is leadership. That wasn't my question. Barry is right that, the school committee was responsible for that decision. Michael, I think, understood my question, but gave a good picture of what the situation is. My question really is, as a community, why are we needing a compromise on the name of Ellen Garrison in the first place? Would we have needed a compromise if 500 people said, let's name the school George Washington? We wouldn't have needed a compromise. Why is a compromise needed when it's Ellen Garrison? As a community, not because Alexa said so. Thank you.
Appreciate that reframe. So as we're getting close to the end, we just want to give every candidate an opportunity to impart some closing words. You have 2 minutes to say what you need to say, and then we'll end this thing here. So to that point, appreciate the time. What'd you say? Oh, and there's coffee. It's been a long thing, so there's coffee in the back if you still need that. So, yeah, Mary, you can start.
Okay, great. Thank you all for coming tonight. I think each one of us is on our own journey of awareness about our own biases, our tolerance, we're all at different stages of a journey, and we're not going to solve this tonight, and we're all going to continue to grow. I just want to leave you with one little anecdote that I think might be helpful. When I first joined the select board, and I told you I was ambivalent about the whole DEI commission idea. We had a application for our Pride Day. And I remember thinking, oh God, because I was getting letters about people saying that they didn't want Pride Day, they didn't want their kids to see flags, and I was thinking, why am I in this controversy? I went to Pride Day, I read the proclamation, I was so scared that my hand was shaking while I was reading the proclamation, and it turned into a beautiful, joyful day. So for me, that was a growing experience of something that I was afraid of because I didn't want to be in the middle of something divisive, to Michael's point. And I had heard threats, and it turned out to be joyful. So I know DEI is tough conversations, and examining our own biases is sometimes painful, but it's also joyful as we learn. I just want to.
I have to say, we've been doing a lot of events, and I will be the first to admit that I'm like, oh my God, another event. There's so many events. This has been awesome. I mean, this has been really nice. I think we should all be allowed to be on the board. We can just expand the number of people on the board. But this is a really genuine conversation, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate listening to other people, and I think I'm kind of even forgot that this is a campaign event because I'm just telling you what I actually think. I think if I have a seat at the table, I mean, these are the values that I bring, and it's to be inclusive, it's to be thoughtful, it's to understand that I don't have all the answers, but to listen to other people. And I really do appreciate hearing other points of view, because you know what? Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm not wrong, but sometimes I'm wrong. And that's okay. So this has felt very genuine and very open, so thank you very much, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we discussed issues that are at the heart of our community. They're emotional issues, as you saw. They're emotional because there's a lot at stake in this election, a lot of issues to deal with. But we are a solid community, we are a caring community, and I think we have to make sure that we instruct our children in that regard. We have to instruct our peers in that regard. I'm very fortunate to be what I call a multi-generational candidate. I have a multi-generational family in this room right here. Hi, Jasper. And that gives me, a multi-generational perspective on all these issues as well, and other candidates have that as well. I really firmly believe that a vibrant, successful, and energetic community also is a diverse one. It's clear that if you look at other communities, that is the case. Diverse cultural, diverse talents, diverse experiences, and I think our community is on a trajectory in that direction. We're not there yet. We have work to do, and I think some of the cross-fertilization across committees and civic engagement of people of different races, religions, and ages, I think is really important. I think that decreases isolation. I think breaking down silos, I've talked about this before in our government, across committees, between the select board and the school committee, to some extent, I think is important, especially in the DEI area. We have a DEI program at the schools. We have a DEI commission here. Is there enough coordination? I don't know. I don't sit at that table. But I think educating our young people is so fundamental to a future community. How could it not be part of an integrated DEI experience, a DEI learning, a DEI leadership in town? So if elected, I'm going to try to improve those communications and to optimize our talent in town, whether it's DEI or other talents, and tap on external talent that doesn't feel that they're being heard. We have some important challenges on fiscal sustainability, which is in the process of being tackled, but we have to be mindful that we cannot outspend our resources. And I think we do have the opportunity. We haven't talked about land use here because it's not fundamental for the topic, but I think housing. But we're blessed with the opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years of envisioning what our community is going to look like, how to take care of some of these needs, affordable housing, and we'll solve some of those assets. We'll solve some of the fiscal problems. So I think I'm anxious to work on those problems. They're complicated, they take teamwork, and they may take compromise at times. And so I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all tonight.
Okay. This is a bit different because usually our opening statements are at the beginning. So I think you've all heard what I'm about and why I'm here. There are 3 things that I basically want to do. I want to bring educational excellence to our students every day. We'll be mindful of the gaps that we have, mindful of the way that our children come to us with all different educational styles, and use what we know about them to be able to speak to them at each level, at their level, and bring them up so they have the support that they need to achieve, the challenges they need to excel. I want to look at our schools, and again, the analytics side that we both share, I want to use to look at the data that we've collected on our students since we have them from pre-K to 22. I want to look at the data that we collect on our students to look at how our schools do what they do, take that information to look at what we do and make it better. But probably the most important thing, the thing that enthuses me, one of the job responsibilities of a school committee is to be the conduit for information from the community, from the constituents, to the administration, from the administration, so you know all the good things the administration has done, to the community. That conduit allows for free interplay of ideas. The ideas will be discussed appropriately, cordially, but that intermix of ideas will lead to better decisions for our community, for our students. So in the final analysis, at the end, we come out with citizens that can step into a multicultural world and do well and excel. That's what I want to use my skills as a communicator, my skills as a collaborator to bring to our community. I'm old. Our kids have been out of school for about 20 years. But instead of sitting back and taking pictures of bugs and birds, which I really like to do, instead of doing that, I'm going to sit through this and the next forum so I can win the job, and hopefully I've convinced you that I'm worth your vote. And I would appreciate having that opportunity to serve on the school committee, so thank you.
All right. Is this working? Is it? Oh, there we go. As Michael mentioned, this was supposed to be an opening statement, but I'm going to close with my opening. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? These are not just ideals. I strongly feel that these are something we should, we must ensure that they are reflected in the daily experiences of every child that goes through the Concord school system, whether that child is a Concord resident, whether Carlisle, whether Boston. Every educator, every family in our school should feel seen and accepted for who they are. There are three essential principles that I've been basing my campaign on. First one is a belief in belonging. I am a first-generation immigrant. I'm a proud American, and I know firsthand the importance of feeling seen and being valued. Our schools have to create an environment where every student, no matter their race, no matter their background, no matter their ability, no matter their aptitude, no matter their learning style, they sense belonging and they feel the school is there to support them and provide them opportunity to succeed. The second is I'm committed to excellence for all. I have a PhD, I have years of experience working on tough national security problems, and I've learned that I have the unique skill set of using rational arguments as well as data to advance causes. Now, in some cases, as was pointed out, I forget who pointed out this today, in cases of DEI, data is not going to be your friend, right? We don't want our kids to be data points. We want them to be accepted for who they are. So understanding where to use data and where not to use data is something I believe I can do strongly. Every child should have access to a high-quality education that is going to prepare them, not just to tackle the problems of today, but the opportunities that will rise tomorrow. And last, I have a dedication to community engagement. I have done community service all my adult life, whether it's for the Red Cross, whether it's for the PTG, whether it's for the Concord Ed Fund. I understand that progress happens through open, honest conversations with the community. Some of these conversations, as was mentioned, will be tough, but the conversations always can be polite, right? I've stated this during the league debate. You can't shake hands with a clenched fist. We need to open our arms, embrace each other, forgive each other when we make mistakes, but realize that we're all on this journey together for a better Concord. Thank you.
All right, please give a round of applause to all of our candidates tonight. All right. Thank you all so much for your courage, your openness, and please have a good evening. Thanks for coming out. Coffee in the back, don't forget.